Today, we're going to dive into a really fascinating ethical case study. It's all about a programmer named Dave who worked on a little side project after hours using his company's equipment. Now, on the surface, it seems totally harmless, but his story, well, it opens up a huge can of worms about workplace ethics that's probably more relevant than you think. But before we even get to Dave, let me ask you something. Have you ever, used the office printer for concert tickets or maybe just charged your personal phone at your desk? It feels like no big deal, right? Well, that's the exact gray area we're going to be exploring today. All right, so let's set the scene and meet our main character. Okay, so this is Dave. He's a programmer at a big software company. And he's noticed that overnight, the company's powerful computers are just sitting there with a ton of unused processing power. So he gets an idea. He starts coming in after hours and using one of the computers for a personal project, a cool little program to help manage his stock portfolio. He's not really using any physical stuff, no paper, no ink, so it feels almost invisible, like no harm, no foul. And that, right there, is the million-dollar question. Looking at what Dave is doing, is it ethical? Is he just being resourceful, making clever use of idle equipment, or is there something else going on here? All right, it's time for the verdict. Let's break down the judgment on Dave's actions. We're going to look at it through the lens of some really core principles, like property and permission. So the short answer, it's unethical, plain and simple. Now, I know that might seem a little harsh, especially since he wasn't really taking anything you can hold, but let's unpack the reasoning behind it. You see, this whole thing really boils down to three super simple facts. Number one, the equipment is not his. Number two, he never got permission to use it for his personal stuff. And number three, using company resources for personal reasons, well, that can break company policy. And maybe even more importantly, it breaks the trust between him and his employer. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if the computers had spare capacity. That capacity just wasn't his to use.
Okay, but let's change the variables a little bit. What happens if we throw a new ingredient into the mix? What about profit?
So, let's imagine Dave's little program is so good that he decides to turn it into a side hustle, a real business, managing stock portfolios for other people. He's still using the company's computers after hours, but now he's making cold, hard cash from it. So what do you think? Does this new wrinkle change the ethical math here? Does turning a personal project into a for-profit business on company equipment make it better, worse, or is it the same? Oh, it makes it so much worse. We're talking far more unethical here, because now he's not just using company resources, he is actively profiting from them. This is a huge leap from a kind of questionable side project to deliberate exploitation. And think about it. This could expose his company to all sorts of new legal and security risks. Yeah, we are on a completely different level of wrong now. All right, let's try another angle. What if Dave's justification is that he's the one who's being taken advantage of? Okay, in this new scenario, Dave's salary is way below the industry average. He feels totally unappreciated. And he starts thinking, you know what? I deserve a little something extra. This computer time is a perk I've basically earned. So his motivation isn't just a hobby anymore, it's like a form of self-compensation. So does that justification hold any water? Can feeling wronged by your employer give you a moral hall pass to use their stuff without asking?
The answer is a hard no. It's still unethical. And this is a really important point. Our personal feelings about what's fair don't get to rewrite the basic rules of ownership and permission. Feeling underpaid might be a totally valid complaint, but the ethical way to handle that is to go negotiate a raise or maybe find a new job, not to just take company resources. Only the employer gets to decide what the benefits and compensation are.
Now, for our next scenario, we're wading into the classic, but everybody's doing it, argument. Let's just say Dave isn't the only one. A bunch of other programmers are also using the computers for personal stuff after hours. And here's the kicker. Management knows about it. They just turn a blind eye. It's become this unspoken part of the company culture. So does that finally change things? If it's basically an accepted, unwritten rule of the office, is Dave's behavior finally okay? This is where things get really complicated. From a purely technical standpoint, Dave's action is still unethical. Just because other people are breaking a rule doesn't magically make it right. He still has a personal responsibility to ask for permission. However, and this is a big however, the company now shares some of the blame. They're the ones who created this confusing culture by not enforcing their own rules. It's messy, for sure, but two wrongs don't make a right, so Dave is not off the hook. Okay, let's introduce one final twist to this whole thing. We're going to change who owns the computer. What if it's not a private company at all? So now imagine Dave is a government employee. He's using a computer owned by a public agency, funded by taxpayers. Dave might start thinking, hey, this computer belongs to the people, and I'm one of the people, so what's the big deal? Does that logic actually work? Does it make his actions ethical now?
Absolutely not. In fact, this might be the most clear-cut, unethical scenario of them all, and definitely the riskiest. Government equipment is there for official government work, period. The whole argument that it belongs to the people doesn't give any single employee the right to use it for personal gain. Misusing public resources isn't just an ethical problem. It can come with some very serious legal trouble.
So when you look at them one by one, the core ethical principles in Dave's case are pretty straightforward. But this whole thing brings us right back to that gray area we started with. The rules on paper might be clear, but what about your company's culture? Is it really well defined and understood by everyone, or could it be creating its own Daves without even realizing it? Something to think about.